Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Reena Kaur Ruprai, and I'm from Department of Physiology, GMC Nagpur. Today, I'm going to speak about the physiology of pain. So before we get into the physiology of pain, let me tell you or narrate you a small story of a physician who was David Livingstone. This David Livingstone, being a physician, went to the interior of Africa. And he explored that every time he encountered a lion, he became dumb. That means he was able to tackle with any physical and mental stress. So he was the first person who attributed that there is a narcotic kind of an effect or there is an altered level of consciousness because of which he is able to deal with physical stress or mental stress. Obviously, at that time it was not penned that there are endorphins, but he came to know about that. Later on, with the studies progressed and discoveries progressed, it was seen that football players with broken legs continue to play. So this led to something that definitely something is being released endogenously from the body. And as Shearer has said, discovery never ends. The more we learn, we come to know, the more we don't know. So with a briefing, let's get started with physiology of pain. So, you know, it is a competency-based education, so you always have to plan your lesson. You must know the learning objectives which are must known to you, which you should be able to draw a well-labeled diagram of the pain pathway. Describe the course, termination of the lateral spine-thalamic tract. You must know the receptors for the pain. You must know the types of the pain. And something about endogenous analgesic pain pathway. You must also, if you are desirable, certain desirable topics which you should know are something related to the gate control theory, what is stents, and what is stress analgesia, right? So, how to correlate this in a clinical manner, because you know nowadays we mainly come with a clinical integration and you get questions over it. So just putting in front of you a case history which would just provoke thoughts into your mind. A medical student got injured while playing hockey, which was a sharp, well-localized pain in the left knee. He still continued to play till the match was over. The pain was relieved, though he could not sleep that night. So with this basic in your mind, you should be able to answer which fibers help in localization of pain, why could not the student sleep, and which neurotransmitters are involved in the pain. And I'm sure that at the end of the lesson, you will be able to get these answers for yourself. So just throwing an MCQ in front of you so that again at the end of the discussion you will get the answer on yourself. Which of the following explains why individuals in severe pain have got a difficulty without sedative medication? A. The somatosensory cortical area for pain perception blocks the sleep generating circuits. B. The pain fibers entering the dorsal horn and the ascending pain pathways block the sleep circuits. C. The ascending pain pathways provide excitatory inputs to the brain reticular formation. Or D. The neurotransmitters used in the slow pain diffuse to neighboring group cells, increasing their excitability. So we will come to this answer at the end of the session, and I'm sure you will be able to give the answer on yourself. Another, which of the following statements concerning the transmission of pain into the CNS is correct? A. The fast pain fibers conduct at a velocity of 6 to 30 meter per second. Type A delta pain fibers are responsible for localization of pain. C. Upon entering the spinal cord, the fast and the slow pain fibers synapse with same population. Or D. The paleo-spine-thalamic tract is specialized to conduct rapid pain signals, right? So with this briefing, with the history, with few MCQs and a clinical presentation, let's jump on to pain and let's define what is pain. So what is pain? It is defined by the International Association for the Study of Pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage described in terms of such damage. Now, what is the purpose of pain? Do you think that all the pain is good? Should we have any pain or not? And what is the advantage of pain? You know that the pain receptors are non-adapting receptors, right? So, what is the utility? What is the purpose of pain? So, this pain sensation is different from the other sensations because it is not giving any information about the quality of the stimulus. It is indicating that there is definitely a physical damage. So it is an unpleasant sensation useful to make someone aware that some harmful agent is definitely present close in contact with the body, and the person needs to react to this either taking himself away from the pain stimulus or going to the medications. That means he has to cure himself. That means something damaging is present in the body. And finally, the pain receptors are non-adaptable. That means they will keep you apprised that something wrong is going on in the body. So, it has got a protective function. Now, these pain receptors are called as nociceptors, and structurally they are free nerve endings. That means they are not encapsulated, they are free nerve endings, and they can be classified or typed into different ways. First is mechanical nociceptors that respond to strong pressure, like from a sharp object, a prick, or from a knife. Thermal receptors, you know that extreme temperatures, more than 45, less than 20, this will stimulate your nociceptors. Chemical, like bradykinin, histamine, acidic, this is very, very important in the GIT also, and polymodal, which respond to a variety of stimuli. There is a special non-selective cation channels called as the transient receptor potential channels that mainly respond to mechanical, chemical or thermal stimuli. So these are the TRP1. The TRP1 helps in detection of chemicals like capsaicin. Then you have got TRPA1, where A stands for anchorin, detecting cold, mechanical and a chemical stimuli. You have got ASIC, that is the acid sensing channels. And finally, you have got the purinergic receptors, that is the nociceptive mechanical stimuli, which cause release of ATP. That acts on these purinergic receptors, which are G-protein coupled receptors. And you have got tyrosine receptor kinase A that is activated by the nerve growth factor whenever there is tissue damage. Now, with knowing about the types of receptors involved, let us see something about how do you classify the pain. The pain can be broadly classified as a fast pain and a slow pain. What are the features? Fast pain is sharp, well localized, pricking resulting mainly from the activation of the nociceptions, which are the A delta fibers. The fast pain travels very fast, within 0.1 millisecond of the application of stimulus, carried by A delta fibers, which have got a receptive field and a topographic presentation in the cortex, and importantly, it is transmitted by the neo-spinothalamic tract. Now remember that A delta fibers are carrying what? They are carrying fast pain and fine pressure, right? They are carrying fast pain and fine pressure. And because this spinothalamic tract, it ascends up in the medial lemniscus, you are able to localize pain. So one of the most important function of the neo-spinothalamic tract is localization of pain. Second, what are the accompaniments of fast pain? What do you see? Suppose there is a bite by an insect. What do? The first thing you do is you will move your hand. Okay? So the withdrawal reflex, so that you are moved away from the painful stimuli. Sometimes sometimes very much scared, if it is an unusual, unknown attack. And you get a sympathetic response in the form of increased blood pressure, tachycardia. That all will help in the mobilization for source of energy. Second, we have a slow pain. This slow pain is poorly localized, dull, throbbing, burning sensation that results from the activation of the nociceptors, basically the type C fibers. Appears a bit slow, about 1 second after the application of stimulus, and it is carried by type C unmyelinated nerve fibers. And remember, A delta are myelinated nerve fibers. And slow pain is basically with the paleo-spinothalamic tract. So if you want to have in a nutshell regarding fast pain and slow pain, remember, fast pain will immediately apprise you that something wrong has happened in the body, will help you in a sharp localization, and slow pain will bring about a continuous awareness that something wrong is going on in the body, and what you say is the affective component of pain is by the slow pain. This slow pain, as I said, carries an affective component in the form of unpleasantness. You get a feeling of irritation, you are frustrated because your pain is not getting relieved. Autonomic symptoms are there like nausea, sweating, and every one of us has experienced this when you have got a severe abdominal pain, how the symptoms accompany, and usually associated with a generalized reduction in the skeletal muscle tone. So this is a table showing us the different features between the A delta and the type C fibers. You can see that the A delta are less in number, whereas A delta are myelinated and type C are unmyelinated. The diameter is more for A delta, 2 to 5. Therefore, the conduction velocity is also more, 12 to 30 with A delta, and type C is 0.5 to 2. The specific stimulus for the A delta are mechanoreceptors, whereas type C can be stimulated polymodally by, they are sensitive to histamine, kinins. Impulse conduction is basically fast with A delta in comparison to type C. Now, this is the pathway of pain, right? So, we will just look on to the pain pathway before we describe it as a neospinothalamic or a paleospinothalamic tract. Let us first discuss just only in the form of the lateral spinothalamic tract. Okay. Now you can see that this lateral spinothalamic tract, suppose you've got pain on the right side, okay, or suppose this is the left side. Left side, there is a strong prick and you are getting pain. This pain will be appreciated by the free nerve endings and carried through the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. These are the first order neurons, the dorsal root ganglion, which is a kind of a pseudo-unipolar neuron. So the fibers are getting into the spinal cord. You can see that in the spinal cord itself, there is going to be crossing of the fibers of the lateral spinothalamic tract. This is something to be very nicely remembered when you have to differentiate it from the dorsal column, which do not cross in the spinal cord. That means the first relay station is in the dorsal hollow spinal cord. The second order neurons, they cross. So the crossing being in the spinal cord, now up, they are not going to cross anywhere. So this is very important that the first relay station is spinal cord. The second order neurons are activating over here. This point, which we will study a bit in more detail, is very, very important for the analgesic system. Now these fibers, as they ascend up, you can see they are directly going to relay in the thalamus, which is the second relay station, okay? The second relay station, and the third order neurons are going to be conveyed into the somatosensory cortex area 3, 1, 2, right? So, the first order neurons being the dorsal root ganglion, crossing in the spinal cord, and after being crossing the second order neurons directly now ascending up to the level of thalamus, second relay station, and third order neurons into the somatosensory area 3, 1, 2. And let me tell you that as far as the parietal cortex is involved, important function of the parietal cortex is not only the perception of pain, but localization of the pain. Because thalamus is very well perceiving the pain, right? Thalamus has got the capability to perceive the pain, so the localization of the pain becomes more important function of the cortex. Now, you can see the difference. We have classified the pain fibers. Especially important is in the thalamus. The slow pain fibers, they are mainly going through the intralaminar nuclei, whereas the fast pain fibers to the ventrobasal complex of the thalamus. Now, this I have taken especially to show you the difference between the two ascending tracts, where you can see that there is crossing. Okay, the lateral spinothalamic tract shows a crossing, whereas the dorsal column, that is the tractus cuneatus and the gracilis, they do not cross in the spinal cord. So their crossing will be after they relay in the medulla. That is, in the medulla, that is going to be the first relay station, nucleus cuneatus and nucleus gracilis, and after that they are going to then cross, and the second relay station will be same both for thalamus and third order neurons same. So the basic difference in the two pathways is the first relay station and the second order neurons. Now, this is a very, very important section. You see that the A delta or the neospinothalamic tract is mainly terminating in the lamina 1 of the dorsal horn of spinal cord, whereas the spinothalamic tract, the slow pathway or the paleospinothalamic is going to end in the lamina 2 and 3. Lamina 2 and 3, the substantia gelatinosa, where is a very, very important spinal analgesic system. Okay, so lamina 1 for neospinothalamic, lamina 2 and 3, that is the substantia gelatinosa for paleospinothalamic. Again, you can see that as these pathways are ascending upwards, they give a lots of collaterals to the tectum, periaqueductal region, reticular formation, and here we get the answer of our MCQ that why the person is not able to sleep. He is not able to sleep because the collaterals are given to the reticular formation that makes the patient aware that something wrong is going and he is not able to sleep. The efferents or the collaterals going to the periaqueductal region play a very, very important role in endogenous analgesic system, which we will see a couple of minutes later. If you come to the clinical types of pain, you can classify the pains as somatic, visceral, referred, radiating and a projecting pain. So just a glimpse of all these types of pain. First is the somatic pain, that is arising, as the name indicates, from the tissues of the body, not the viscera, but from the tissues of the body. It can be superficial, it can be deep. Superficial is arising mainly from the skin, but the deep from the muscles, joints, bones and fascia. Second is the visceral pain. Visceral pain is known by its feature that it is a poorly localized pain coming from the viscera with unpleasant sensation and an emotional or an affective component. And it is mainly associated with nausea, vomiting, profuse sweating and many a times lowering of blood pressure. This results in guarding, right? A common feature which you get is guarding, that is the reflex contraction of the abdominal muscles. And it can radiate to the other side. Common examples are like inflammation, suppose appendicitis, pancreatitis, over-distension of a viscera, spasm of a viscera, right? Like the spasm is going to result in the mechanical stimulation of pain endings and ischemia. For example, in the uterine contractions during childbirth. Chemical stimuli like peritonitis, when there is a perforated duodenal or a peptic ulcer, and ischemia, pain because of the acidic end products or degenerative products like bradykinin. Now, remember that this pain from the viscera, the neural pathway is carried by unmyelinated type C afferents, which are traveling in the sympathetics majority, and from the pelvic they are mainly carried in the parasympathetics. Okay, so this is unmyelinated type C fibers for the visceral pain. The cell bodies of these are located in the dorsal root ganglion. The other type of pain is the referred pain. You know, everybody have experienced some or the other time that what is a referred pain? As the name indicates, that the pain is originating because of the irritation of the viscera, but is felt not in the organ, but some other somatic structure, usually skin. Okay, some other somatic structure, usually skin. For example, the pain of myocard ischemia referred to the left shoulder and arm, or the pain which is in the lower part of the ureter because of a calculi referred to the corresponding testis and inner thigh. Now, what is the reason for this? You know that the skin is topographically mapped and the viscera are not mapped. So, the pain is identified as originating from the skin and not from the viscera. So, the theories are there related to the referred pain. First theory is the convergence theory. So, what does this convergence theory say? You can see that this is the common second order neuron, right? There is a common second order neuron, and in this second order neuron, there is convergence of the fibers coming from the somatic, that is from the skin as well as from the viscera. So, both of them are converging on the same neuron, and somatic pain is more common, and the brain interprets that somatic structure is responsible for the pain, not the visceral structure. So, this is basically the convergence theory. The second theory is the facilitation theory. What is facilitation theory? Now, you can see that the afferents coming from the viscera, they are giving a collateral, okay? They are giving a collateral to a neuron. This neuron is also receiving the afferents from the somatic pain structures. So, the afferents from the viscus are giving a collateral on the second order neuron or the spanthalamic neuron, which themselves are receiving afferents from the somatic pain fibers. This results in a facilitation or strengthening of the pain signal. So, this is the convergence theory and the facilitation theory regarding referred pain. Another type of pain is the radiating pain. You know that sometimes the visceral pain is experienced both locally and also at a distant site. This pain spreads from the local to the distant area and is called as a radiating pain. For example, the pain of the appendicitis, which begins in the right iliac fossa and it radiates towards the center of the abdomen. Finally, the last type of pain is the projected pain. As we know, we teach phantom limb, like where sensory pain fibers are stimulated anywhere in their course up till the cortex. The pain sensations will always be projected or to the area where the receptors were localized initially. This follows the law of projection. For example, phantom limb. It could be phantom limb, it could be phantom tooth, it could be phantom breast, but it is based upon the law of projection. So, these pain sensations are produced due to irritation of the nociceptive fibers at the stump, but they are projected where the receptors used to be located initially. Now, coming to certain important terms related to pain is hyperalgesia. All of us might have experienced this, that sometimes there is an enhanced painful stimuli, right? So, whenever there is an enhanced painful stimuli, it is hyperalgesia, which is of two types, primary and secondary. Primary, noxious stimuli produces more severe pain, right? And sometimes a non-noxious stimuli like touch can result in pain, what is called as allodynia. Have you ever experienced, suppose there is osteoarthritis, right? Now, if there is a severe osteoarthritis and touch evoked pain of herpetic neuralgia, all of these are examples of mechanical allodynia. Or you might have observed, like suppose if there is pain because of some, there is a pain because of some hot, like you've got something hot over your hand. And even if it's hot, but if there is strong sun rays coming, or even if you touch that, or even if you take a shower, then also the sensation evoked will be pain. hyperalgesia you can see is because of the release of the varied neurotransmitters. The tissue injury itself releases bradykinin, prostaglandins. These activate the nociceptors, right? So there is tissue injury. Tissue injury is releasing chemicals like bradykinin, prostaglandins that sensitize the nociceptors. These nociceptors in turn release more chemicals, that is substance P and the calcitonin gene-related peptide. This substance P is further going to aggravate the pain by causing the mast cell degranulation, causing the release of histamine, further activating the nociceptors. Substance P and GRP, they are also responsible for the extravasation and dilatation of the blood vessels. You have seen that there is edema usually when there is injury. So what is primary hyperalgesia? The tissue injury itself is releasing chemicals, but chemicals from the nociceptors. But the nociceptors themselves are releasing more and more of the chemicals and aggravating the pain. What is secondary hyperalgesia? Secondary hyperalgesia is also called as the central sensitization or winding up, which is basically because of the long-term potentiation of the spinothalamic fibers. Now coming to a very, very important topic, that what is the pain suppression system, right? So what now we have considered was definition of pain, the purpose of pain, types of pain, receptors of pain, the pain pathway, and comparing the pain pathway with that of the dorsal column and looking into the crossing levels. Now, what is pain suppression? That means even if you are not taking any medications, there is something in the body that helps to suppress the pain, which actually is of two types, that is spinal pain suppression and a supraspinal pain suppression. The spinal pain suppression was given basically by Melzack and Wall in 1965, which he proposed as the gate control hypothesis. Now, what is this gate control hypothesis? See, what is this theory is the basis for acupuncture, TENS, that is the transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, or commonly what we do whenever there is pain, we apply counter irritant. So the counter irritant basically is not responsible for subsiding the pain. The massage is actually the healing factor. So when you are massaging or by TENS or by acupuncture, you are stimulating type B, that is A beta myelinated nerve fibers, which get stimulated by touch and by crude pressure. Now, A beta has got a diameter more than type C, right? So these A beta fibers, they are going to go all the way to the dorsal horn of spinal cord in the substantia gelatinosa. There they are going to activate one inhibitory interneuron, right? That inhibitory interneuron is supposed to be the gate. How is it functioning like a gate? When that inhibitory interneuron is stimulated by the collaterals. See, you can see over here that this is the interneuron and it is stimulated by a collateral coming from the A beta fibers. That inhibitory interneuron secretes opioids that are able to bring about both presynaptic inhibition and postsynaptic inhibition. They will bring about presynaptic inhibition of the first order neurons and prevent the release of substance P, right? So by bringing about the presynaptic inhibition, they are preventing the release of the neurotransmitter, the pain producing neurotransmitter, that is substance P. And by causing postsynaptic inhibition, they are causing hyperpolarization of the second order neurons. So we are bringing both presynaptic inhibition, postsynaptic inhibition, and we are preventing the pain pathway to ascend up. Okay, we are decreasing the transmission of pain by inhibiting the pain at the level of spinal cord itself through the interneurons, which are acting as gate. So the gate will close when the type B fibers will stimulate this inhibitory interneuron, which is the opioid secreting interneuron. So this proposed theory given by Gate becomes the basis of massage or counter irritants or TENS, which we use very, very commonly in pain management. What is the mechanism of these opioids? These opioid receptors, they basically are G protein coupled receptors, decreasing cyclic AMP and bringing about hyperpolarization to inhibit the release of the neurotransmitters. This is very important because when we have to integrate the topic with pharmacology and when we speak about the morphine antagonists like naloxones, so you must know that how the morphine is acting as a analgesic, acting spinally at the level of these interneurons and also supraspinally at the level of periaqueductal gray matter. Yes. Now, this is something very, very important. The supraspinal pain suppression system, you can see it begins all the way from the periaqueductal gray matter. This periaqueductal gray matter is receiving inputs not only from the pain pathway but also from the frontal cortex and hypothalamus. You know that hypothalamus is a part of limbic system, right? So this limbic system gets activated in stress. That is the basis of the stress-induced analgesia. So what is happening is that the fibers descending from the cortex, from the hypothalamus, they come all the way to the periaqueductal gray region, bringing about the release of the neurotransmitter serotonin. So serotonin has got a role in pain suppression. These serotonergic fibers will go on and terminate in the raphe magnus. I'm extremely sorry. The periaqueductal gray matter releases opioids. So the fibers coming from the periaqueductal gray region are mainly the opioid containing fibers. These fibers will terminate on the raphe magnus nucleus where there will be secretion of serotonin. So these serotonergic fibers, and it is also claimed that there are noradrenergic fibers coming from the locus coeruleus. So the noradrenergic and the serotonergic fibers, they come all the way to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord in the substantia gelatinosa and bring about two important effects. First is, they will cause presynaptic inhibition of the first order neurons, that is the presynaptic inhibition of the spinothalamic neurons, and prevent the release of substance P. Second is, they are going to activate the inhibitory interneurons, the same inhibitory interneurons which we said as the gate. So by presynaptic inhibition, there is decrease in the release of neurotransmitters, and by stimulating the opioid neurons, they are again bringing about presynaptic as well as postsynaptic inhibition. That means inhibiting the transmission of pain in either way. Right? So when we come across that even when the soldier is fighting and he is in pain and agony, he continues to fight. So that is because of the stimulation via the limbic system. Right? Another important thing is that with stress, there is release of corticotropin releasing hormone. Corticotropin releasing hormone acts on the pituitary to bring about secretion of ACTH. But ACTH is synthesized from a large molecule that is a pre-opiomelanocortin. The pre-opiomelanocortin is releasing not only acetylcholine but also endorphins, right? And melanocyte stimulating hormone. So we have got one factor coming through the CRH releasing endorphins, the second factor that is activated from the frontal cortex, hypothalamus to the periaqueductal gray region, releasing the endogenous opioids, all the way coming to the raphe magnus nucleus secreting serotonin, and the serotonergic and the non-adrenergic pathway then relaying on the second order neurons, bringing both presynaptic inhibition and postsynaptic inhibition. Right? So this is a very, very important aspect as we consider for the physiology of pain, including the stress-induced analgesia. Right? And you must remember that morphine is acting at both levels. It can act supraspinally at the level of periaqueductal gray matter. It can act spinally at the level of the opioid secreting neurons in the spinal cord. So finally, we come to the conclusion of this with one case history. Now, I have been restraining only to physiology of pain. You know that you can add this topic, you can integrate this topic with pain management as well. But then pain management itself becomes another topic to be dealt. So being concerned only with physiology, I just like to entertain all my learners today only with the physiology of pain, the types of pain, not only the ascending pathway but also emphasizing on the descending pathway so that you are able to correlate it much better when you study analgesia in any of your clinical subject. So just look into this last question before we end up. A 14-year-old boy who's brought to an emergency OPD, he has got some crush injury with a history of a roadside accident. The boy looks pale, semi-conscious. He's having a low volumic fast pulse. There is no bleeding evident, but it reveals that there are fractures in the leg. Now, I ask you that should any medication be administered to this boy, and if administered, which and why and what is the route of transmission? Now, the symptoms of this boy suggest that he has got some kind of a crush injury and he is likely to go into neurogenic shock. So, the first priority at the level of emergency OPD will be to alleviate the pain. And as far as elevation of pain, it is very important that morphine is the best way to alleviate the pain. So, give an IV bolus of morphine, continue it with divided doses. This will not only lessen the pain, it will decrease the apprehension, it will counteract the neurogenic shock. Once the pain is relieved, the patient becomes available to us for better clinical examination and better evaluation for the further prospect of management. So with this, let me tell you that all pain is not bad, because a small painful stimulus is very important for your success. So if you cannot endure the pain of struggle, you will never have the prize of success. So with this, thank you everyone for your patient learning, patient listening, and happy learning. Thank you.